Welcome to The Explainer. I'm so thrilled to have you here today because we're diving into a phrase I can almost guarantee you've heard a million times. You know the one? Fake it until you make it. Usually you see it plastered on a motivational poster or tossed around as casual career advice. But today, we're looking way past the cliche. We are going to decode this, not just as a catchy slogan, but as a surprisingly complex psychological and sociological phenomenon. Because as it turns out, this mindset is a massive double-edged sword. It carries some pretty incredible benefits, but also some seriously heavy risks that ripple across our personal lives, our friend groups, and right into our workplaces.
So here's our roadmap for today. We're going to start by actually defining the cliché. Then we'll dive deep into your inner psychology, explore how it impacts social trust, examine the really high stakes in the professional world, and finally, we'll weigh aspiration against outright deception.
All right, let's jump right into step one and establish exactly what this tactic means in a real, clinical sense.
At its core, fake it until you make it means projecting confidence, competence, and optimism so that you eventually realize those exact qualities in reality. I don't want you to view this as just pretending or lying. Really, look at it as a pragmatic strategy for growth. It's a recognized, highly effective tool to smash through self-doubt. When you're standing right at the absolute edge of your comfort zone, this mindset acts like a bridge to the person you aspire to be. You're basically borrowing confidence from your future self to survive the terrifying challenges of today.
And we aren't just talking about empty posturing here. There is real science behind this, a concept known as embodied cognition. It's the reason why standing tall in a superhero power pose before a scary presentation actually makes you feel braver. Behavioral psychology shows us that our outward actions often trigger genuine internal shifts. Simply put, by actively adopting the posture, the daily habits, and the physical actions of the successful person you want to become, you can literally reshape your internal self-narrative. The mind follows the body. You act the part on the outside, and your internal emotional regulation naturally begins to align with that new reality. It's an absolutely huge catalyst for change.
Okay, so let's zoom in a bit to our first level of magnification and explore the duality of what's actually happening inside your own head. On one hand, this strategy builds this incredible psychological armor. It beautifully mitigates imposter syndrome, giving you the courage to take calculated risks and volunteer for projects way before you feel 100% ready. It helps restructure your inner thoughts from, oh man, I don't belong here, to, okay, I'm figuring out how to belong here. But, and this is a big but, there is a heavy toll to inauthenticity. If there's a prolonged gap between who you really are on the inside and this flawless persona you're projecting, that leads to deep emotional exhaustion. It creates cognitive dissonance. You end up living with this chronic anxiety that you're eventually going to be exposed. Plus, if you rely too heavily on this projected certainty, it forces you to suppress your vulnerability. If you're always acting like you have all the answers, it completely blocks genuine self-reflection. It stops you from just raising your hand, admitting you're lost, and asking a mentor for help. Zooming out to our second circle, let's look at how projecting this idealized version of yourself actually changes your relationships with the people around you. We all know that projecting optimism is an incredibly powerful social magnet. We all have that one coworker who confidently marches into a meeting and somehow gets everyone totally hyped about a half-finished idea. People just naturally gravitate toward those who seem to know exactly where they're going. It builds immense social capital. But deep relationships rely on vulnerability, right? If you're constantly wearing the mask of the flawless superstar, it inevitably leads to superficiality. It isolates you from meaningful peer support because nobody knows the real you underneath all that bravado. And most dangerously, it erodes trust. If your peers start to sense that you're faking it is actually intentional deception rather than earnest aspiration, your social credibility evaporates overnight. And let me tell you, that is remarkably hard to earn back.
Now think about what happens when an entire community or industry adopts this mentality. The results scale up dangerously. We start seeing the cultural normalization of performative success. It fosters highly competitive, cutthroat environments where outward appearance suddenly becomes way more important than actual substance. It drastically amplifies social comparison, which just spikes baseline anxiety across entire communities. I mean, everyone is just staring at everyone else's flawlessly curated highlight reel, assuming everyone else has it entirely figured out. It creates an exhausting echo chamber where pure performance outweighs genuine human connection.
Which brings us to a really critical turning point in this explainer. When does optimism actually become fraud? Because as we zoom out to the workplace, the stakes escalate from personal anxiety to massive ethical and financial ruin.
Here in the professional arena, the boundary between being a visionary and being a fraud becomes incredibly sharp. Let's head into the boardroom.
So every benefit here carries a mirror image risk. For example, projecting confidence might land you a stretch role that wonderfully accelerates your skills. Awesome, right? But it can also saddle you with premature responsibility where you just lack the competence to execute safely. Just picture a junior engineer nodding along to complex architecture plans only to crash the company's servers an hour later because they were too afraid to admit they didn't know the system. For leaders, projecting optimism during a crisis offers a much-needed anchor of calm, but taken too far, it breeds toxic positivity. Suddenly, no one dares to point out operational flaws because they don't want to break the illusion of success. And ethically, look, selling a grand future vision before a product fully exists is standard in the startup world. That's part of the game. But the literal minute metrics, capabilities, or safety data are fabricated to maintain that illusion. That bold visionary becomes a fraudster. We've all seen the headlines of high-profile tech startup collapses. That disastrous tipping point happens exactly here.
So let's synthesize everything we've learned today and establish a definitive rule of thumb.
It all boils down to this perfectly defined, healthy boundary. Act with the confidence you aspire to have while actively acquiring the substance to back it up. This whole strategy works and remains incredibly useful only when your aspirational behavior is actively paired with the late nights and the hard work of genuine skill development. The concept turns toxic the moment it shifts from a tool for growth to a tool for deception. You just cannot replace the heavy lifting of true competence with pure performance. The performance should only ever be a temporary shield you hold up while you are furiously building the skills behind it.
I want to leave you with this final thought to reflect on as you navigate your own growth. Are you building a bridge to your future self, or are you just painting a convincing backdrop? Using this mindset to push through fear and step up to a new challenge is brilliant, but using it to hide a lack of substance, that ensures an eventual collapse. Avoiding that tipping point into pure performance is entirely up to you. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this gives you a powerful new framework to tackle your own aspirations.